Hello, everyone, and welcome to Get Hired Live. I'm your host, Brandy Fowler, news reporter for LinkedIn, and I'm coming to you live from the LinkedIn office in Atlanta. Before we get started, as we always do, make sure you hit the comments, tell us about your career, where you're from. This is a great opportunity to network with each other. And if you have any questions as we've talked today, please make sure you drop those in the comments so we can get those answered for you. We have a great show for you today. My colleague Andrew Seaman talked on his podcast, Get Hired, last week about what job seekers can expect in the upcoming year as they're looking for work. And we're going to be digging a little bit deeper into that topic today. He talked to Dan Shabell, who's the managing partner of Workplace Intelligence. And Dan is here with us today, too. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. I
Happy
asked
to
you
be here.
how to pronounce your name so many
Actually,
times.
when anyone gets my last name right, I'm always impressed and amazed. So don't worry about it.
Thank you so much for being here. I want to start with something that I've been seeing a lot of, which is TikTok workplace trends. I'm very curious how that's affecting the workplace. And so, my question for you is we've seen a lot of these trends, and they've all been rooted in self care and work life balance. How do you think employers are going to take those things into consideration as we move into the next year?
Well, I think employers are taking a lot into consideration. And I think depending on the industry, the company, leadership, where the company is located, there's so many different variables in terms of overall strategy of what employee benefits to kind of promote and not. I think you're seeing little bit more on, flexibility. Over 50% of companies offer hybrid, which means, when it comes to that workplace environment, people are working maybe 2 or 3 days a week at home, so they get additional flexibility, and then schedule flexibility for those who have to be on site, such as hourly workers, essential workers, etc. And paid vacation days is definitely one of the bigger ones. But I think that they need to do a lot more, right? And I do think that a lot of employers and CEOs think that they have a little bit more kind of leverage right now when it comes to the employer-employee relationship because of the economy, and a lot of companies at a high level are kind of being careful about what decisions they make because of retention, recruiting, and uncertainty of the future.
Yeah, and I think it's important for them not to lose sight of the things that employees are looking for, and with everything going on too. So thank you for that. I want to take a moment to say hi to some people that are saying hello in the comments. Hi, Roger from Detroit. Madeline from Singapore. Wow. Allison from the UK. Cheryl from North Carolina. Radia from Lebanon, Edward from Puerto Rico, Joy from Seattle, and Rika from Connecticut. Hello to all of you. Thank you for joining from all around the world. Wow. Okay. And you told Andrew when you talked on the podcast that the biggest piece of career advice you would give to job seekers is to make sure they get as much experience as they can as early as they can. So, how do you do that, and what's the benefit of that?
I reflected my own career, and that's exactly what I did. My first job at age 13, first internship right before college, 7 more internships during college, first small business that I created sophomore year of college. And then I had 3 different positions at a Fortune 200 company when I graduated, and then multiple different projects, which then led me to build the kind of career that I have now. So the advice just comes from my background. And I think the easiest way to do that is to do small projects, whether you're getting paid by the hour, by the project. And, sometimes if you're not even getting paid at all, as long as it doesn't require that much work, just to have some sort of portfolio and experience of doing things. And if you want to get kind of extra credit, or do you want to really, really kind of build your profile and get ahead in your career long-term, is try and create case studies. So measure the success of everything you do moving forward. So did you increase efficiencies? Did you increase productivity? Did you increase sales? Did you lower costs? There's so many different metrics, right? That we can kind of evaluate our work, with and using. And so if you start to do that and keep a log of what you're doing, and then build in, a document where you say, hey, this is what I did. This is the result. Maybe here's a testimonial from the company or individual I work with. And then here are the actual results and how this company benefited. I think that's so powerful. And actually, that's the way I think in business. But I think everyone needs to think kind of like a CEO, a consultant, and an entrepreneur in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that same page, side hustles feel like they're really on the rise in comparison to last year. Can you talk about how you can leverage the skills that you pick up working your side hustle? and use
Yes.
it for new opportunities.
Over 50% of people have a side hustle, and the most common reason is for additional income to offset inflation, higher cost of living, and whatnot. So I think that there are tons of ways using LinkedIn, reaching out to individuals. I think a lot of people don't think about this, but for instance, I would go to Amazon and look up various topics. Like, let's say you want to get into marketing or graphic design or you know operations or finance, accounting, whatever that might be. Look at the authors who are writing the books that are relevant in your industry and reach out to them. You have nothing to lose. In fact, I probably reach out to hundreds of people a week, and I've been doing this for 15 years, right? Because there's nothing to lose. And anyone who gives you a chance, that can create so many more opportunities for you, right? Because then you can leverage that relationship. You can leverage that as maybe a case study to then advance and do other things. So I think you should do that. I think you should look at sites like Upwork, Fiverr. There's so many different sites that are like freelance marketplaces that you can tap. The reality is you should be everywhere, just like everything, just like even applying for jobs. You have no idea what's going to work out. And especially if you're early in your career and you don't really have that direction, it's the reason why people who are younger in their career job hop so much more frequently than people who have more responsibilities, are raising a family, so older in their, more experience in their careers, because we're trying to figure out what we want to do. And by having different kind of gig works and different experiences, it starts to allow us to figure out what we want to do and what we don't want to do, which helps you pave your path.
That is fantastic advice. Thank you for that. And I want to take a moment to say hello to a few more people who are chiming in. Hello, Tracy from Nashville, Tim from Colorado, Emmanuel from Texas, Michael from Ohio, Jasmine from Indiana, Tiffany from New York City, and Erica from Virginia. Thank you for joining us today. All right, I want to move on just a little bit. As we talked about a little bit earlier, we're in a season where layoffs are prevalent. And there are so many different factors that can go into, what goes into a layoff, basically. Is there anything that you can do to get ahead of that, to protect yourself before it hits you?
Yeah. So the reality is, even if you're doing all the right things, you might get laid off because maybe you're in a department, maybe the company just has to shave workers. Even if you have a score of 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5, you never know how that's going to play out. So just because you get laid off doesn't mean it's your fault. There are other elements at play that are outside of your control, but it's hard to give advice based on what's outside of your control. Focus on what's in your control, is making people's lives, including your manager, much easier, going above and beyond what you're meant to do on a daily basis, because then that allows you to advance in your career or gain new experiences, which allows you to leverage those experiences and with those results from those experiences and projects you work on to kind of cut across the organization, go up the organization, maybe leverage that to get a job in a different company. So I think that you just want to become, I don't think you can become indispensable per se, but one of the smartest things you could ever do is connect what you do to sales. So the closer you get to sales, the less likely that you will get laid off, because if you can make more money for the company than what you're getting paid, you're justifying your job.
That is fantastic advice. Thank you for that. Now, if you do get laid off, or you're just in a season where you're looking for a new job, how long is it taking for people to get new jobs now?
So this is just an average. I know people who it's taking maybe 6 months or more, depending on how large the company is. You just don't know. There's so many variables. Again, you got to focus on what you can control. But now the average is 42 days. And in 2021, it was 25 days. So it's taking people longer to get that job. And the reality is, while you're searching for a job, just don't search for a job. You got to, get more skills using maybe LinkedIn Learning. You need to maybe do some gig work in the meantime. What I found, and I did a whole study on this years ago, the difference between an active and a passive job seeker. This is extremely important. The people who are passive job seekers will always have the advantage. A passive job seeker is someone who has a job and is open to a new job. So therefore, you're not desperate for a new job. Therefore, you're positioning yourself as being more valuable, right? Passive job seekers are always perceived as more valuable, whether they are or not. You always want to be passive, meaning that if in this job search, you're unemployed and looking for a job, do other things while you're searching for a job to make yourself more employable and position yourself as someone who is, I guess, more passive and more desirable to employers. That's really important, because if you're an active job seeker, the odds are stacked more against you. So that's why when you should always be interviewing throughout your career, even if you have a job, because you have a higher likelihood of landing your next job if you have a job.
That is such great advice. And also, when you're trying to land a job, you have to go through the interview process, and preparing for that interview is important. But still, employers are saying that a lot of job seekers aren't spending the time doing that. What should people be doing to prepare, and what should they include in that process?
This is a great question, because in our research, we found that the number one complaint that hiring managers have is a lack of preparation in the job search. Job seekers are not prepared. Yet, every single year, with advances in technology, especially mobile technology, access to information is more at our fingertips. And because of that, the expectations that you're doing research prior to an interview are that much greater, right? Like, even if you're, doing a Zoom interview or in person, while you're waiting to meet that hiring manager, you could pop up your mobile phone. And even though I believe you should do it before you go into the actual interview, is you can get information as with what products maybe the company is releasing around that time, executive bios, more information about product, services, solutions, the industry as a whole, and bigger trends, because this gives you more to say in the interview, right? It makes you kind of more knowledgeable and positioned as somebody who is really invested in the industry and the company.
Yes, absolutely. And speaking of having information at our fingertips, AI is now a big deal. And AI is influencing the job search a little bit. Can you talk about how it is on the job seeker side and on the employer side too?
Yeah, it's really important to talk about the job seeker and the employer perspective, because both matter. And it's hard for a job seeker to see the lens of a recruiter. And it's sometimes hard for a recruiter to see the lens of a job seeker, even though at some point they were a job seeker. So I think it's important to understand that job seekers are leveraging AI right now, because they can, and it's free, to craft resumes, cover letters, and various other materials when searching for a job. Or even, I think it's smart to leverage AI for preparation. You can tell using ChatGPT, seeking out information about that company, the executives, everything I just said, you can get that information more readily as well. But in the employer side, they're using AI and different systems to be able to weed out different candidates to make their job much easier. A big complaint that employers actually have is that job seekers are using AI to craft, job applications. But I think that's a big mistake, because I think, especially with this new Goldman Sachs report that shows 80% of people will be using AI, and a decent amount of jobs will be eliminated because of AI, and all these big statistics. And I think it's going to be AI is going to impact 100% of the workforce eventually. It already is in terms of scale. It's having a huge dynamic impact. And so I think that employers should embrace job seekers using AI, because it's new skill set that everyone's going to have to learn at some level. And because why wouldn't they? It makes them more efficient. And because it takes so long to hire, and the job application process is kind of annoying for everyone involved, at least it shows a new skill set and positions the individual as somebody who is relevant, which is one of the most important words when it comes to job seeking in the economy.
Definitely. And I'm going to take a question from the audience really quick. Okay, so Mary has a question about applying to jobs without a traditional degree, which brings me to my next question. You told Andrew that we're in a time where skills and assessments are becoming more essential. Skills-based hiring is on the rise. How can you take advantage of skills-based hiring? Where should you start?
Yeah, I think one of the things you need to do is think about the skills you have and the skills you might need to get ahead, and do that kind of analysis on your background and credentials. And then let's say you want to learn about AI or UI design, or one of these really hot skills. What you can do is you can take an online class, you can get certifications, various other credentials to show that you've spent time on this, you've developed some sort of expertise. Employers now are forced to hire untraditional candidates. So an untraditional candidate, and how it's defined, is someone without a traditional background or 4-year degree in this case. And so because of that, because despite all these layoffs, for instance, over 150,000 people in the technology industry, it's companies are still have a labor shortage. Is still, over about 10 million jobs unfilled. So they're looking to kind of spread their wings and maybe recruit at colleges maybe they haven't before, hire, former vets, hire people without a 4-year degree, hire, former convicts. They're really widening this up, and obviously they're trying to use AI in order to close some of those skill and labor gaps. So the smart thing you can do is figure out what these skills are, start developing them, and show your credentials. And that is really going to help you, because a lot of the application system revolves around keywords too. So if you can, show that you have a certain skill set, those keywords will help you get found in those job applicant systems.
I was actually just about to ask you about keywords, because why is it important to make sure you're optimizing your resume and your LinkedIn profile, especially in a time like this?
Yeah, especially if you think about remote work, those remote jobs is 10% fewer now than there were many months ago. And so there's so much more competition for, maybe if you want to work remote, very desirable jobs that allow you to do so. And so you want to do everything you can to be found in the applicant system. And basically technology is the first round of interviews. So you need to get by a machine first. And part of how you do that is optimizing your, profile and your resume and your cover letter to be able to then speak to a human to then sell yourself to get a job. So you always have to think about that, because think about submitting your application. That's not going directly to a human. It's going to a middleman, which is a machine, to then eventually hopefully get you into that interview process.
That's great advice. And I want to take another question from the audience. And we just talked about AI, but Larry has a question about how ChatGPT is influencing resumes. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, more and more applicants are using ChatGPT and AI in order to craft better resumes. And I think that that's only going to improve over time. I think that because the thing is, most job seekers, most people in general, hate crafting resumes and cover letters. Like I used to back in the day, and I couldn't stand doing it. And so I do think that there's some frustration from the job seeker's perspective. And just like even do crafting content and various other things that we do and use AI for, it makes things easier, especially because you have to constantly update it. You have to submit to different jobs, because you never know when you're going to get an interview for what application you send. So I think that efficiency is extremely helpful for job seekers. And I think that it's just going to become more and more common as a result.
Awesome. And then also you talked with Andrew about, I actually love this. You were talking about acting like you're in the role that you want before you get it, and positioning yourself accordingly for that. What is the best way to do that?
I think that's how you advance anyways. You have to almost already have that. You almost have to be a manager before you're a manager. You almost have to, be a senior associate before you're a senior associate. Like that's just how the workplace works. And so that's why, even though there's a lot of kind of resentment for all things work right now that you'll find maybe on TikTok, and people are really frustrated with trying to get ahead at work, and the whole era of quiet quitting, and people just want to do the bare minimum, et cetera. That strategy doesn't really work for getting ahead. The only way to get ahead in our kind of capitalist system and corporate hierarchy and structure is to go above and beyond what you're hired to do. And that means kind of taking on some of the role of the people ahead of you, to then eventually, as long as you have a good manager and they're ambitious too, to eventually get a role like that. So I think that acting the part is the way to becoming the part.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something to think about for everyone, for sure. And going to take another question from the audience, going back to our conversation about side hustles. Erica asks, should you disclose a side hustle to an employer during the hiring process? That's a really good one.
Great question. I believe legally, if it conflicts like if you will continue to do that side hustle when they hire you and there's no conflict of interest, I don't see a reason why you should. Of course, you want to be careful if anything you're doing in terms of a side hustle is public, and if you say something that might go against the kind of the values and whatnot of the company, that could be a problem. But I would disclose it if what you're doing will conflict from if you're putting in too many hours in the side hustle and it's distracting you in the workplace, or what you're doing is competitive to the company and what you're getting hired for. I think that's when you need to cite it.
Really, really good to know. Awesome. And then we have another question from Nicole who asks, do you have any tips for networking from a new grad? I'm sorry, on networking for a new grad. I know how important connections are in this job market, but I'm not sure where to start. It's a good one.
Yeah, I think you start small if you've never done it before, right? Go to your local event, right? Alumni event or college event, or a local meetup, or join an association. There's like really core things you can do, just kind of step into the networking world. For me, it's always been, especially as I've kind of advanced in my career, it's been more specific rather than more general. So who are the types of people you want to meet in the industry? And of course, as I was saying before, like by doing a lot of different, gig jobs and jobs in general, you're kind of figuring out what you want to do, what you don't want to do. You kind of size up your career, and then you can get more focused on the people you want to meet. But I do think there is a skill set of networking too that you can develop if you don't know exactly what you want to do long term for your career. And so those little steps, reaching out to one person a day, like things like that, can really set things in motion for you. And then you don't even think about networking. I've been doing this for 15 or so years, right? And I don't even think about. I'm just doing it. I'm just connecting with people without thinking about it. And that's where you want to go eventually.
That is awesome advice. And then before I let you go, one more question. In your conversation with Andrew, you mentioned that you found it valuable to think of how to make yourself irresistible to companies, especially via your resume and your job search materials. What is the best way to do that? How do you, what tips do you have for creating your own personal branding toolkit?
Yeah, so this is something that I developed back in college. And one of the things that made me stand out when I was searching for a job is, this does age me. It's kind of weird to say, but I had a website, which was not common for a job seeker back then. I had a CD portfolio of the work that I was doing with, during my internships and part of my side hustles in business. But you could do it, a Dropbox portfolio or whatnot. There's other ways to do it, or show it on your LinkedIn profile. So there's other ways to kind of make that more modern rather than having a CD, which would probably work against you at this point. But really making yourself irresistible is about, think from the recruiter's perspective. Like, what is really going to blow them away? Like, what makes you stand out? Have you done anything that other people might not have done before, especially maybe at your age and where you are in your career? Well, you want to pump that up in your resume and put it closer to the top, right? So I really believe in, what do you have, or what have you done that is more unique than other job seekers? Because that's really what's going to make you stand out.
That is so awesome, Dan. Thank you so much for sharing all of that valuable information. That was, so many great tidbits in there. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And this week on the Get Hired podcast, Andrew sat down with Brittany Cole, who is the CEO of Career Thrivers. They talked about how to overcome disappointment in your job search, from getting rejected to getting ghosted. You can check out the episode wherever you listen to podcasts when it's live on Wednesday, April 5th. And to answer your questions about the topic, Brittany will join me on the next episode of Get Hired Live. That will be on Monday, April 10th at noon Eastern Time. And you can RSVP to the show using the link in the comments. Thank you for joining, and I'll see you soon. Have a great week.